Hello everyone, welcome back. We're here in the garage with the track car and it's late October, which means it's the end of the driving season, at least for me and most of the Northeast, if not all by now. So we're going to do a post-season / post-event check over and inspection and kind of go through the car and talk a little bit about plans for this winter and for next year, maybe at the end. But the general theme here is going to be to check everything over. So we'll have a little bit of a review of that and what to look for, kind of in addition to the last video I did, which is going to be pretty similar. The things that we want to check really don't change too much. Postseason maintenance is another important aspect. Since I'm going to be doing some work to the car, I'm probably going to skip over some of the immediate postseason stuff, just because I'm going to end up taking things further apart and kind of doubling up efforts for no reason. Most notably, for the brakes, the front calipers are going to come apart. The pistons are coming out, so I can put some stiffer anti-knockback springs behind the pistons. I have some in there now made by Willwood, and I was just kind of guessing at what might work or be adequate, and they're not quite adequate. They certainly work, but not completely. Particularly at Watkins Glen, after coming up through the S's and getting to the bus stop in that braking zone at 138, 140, the pedal travels more than it should, which is a little disconcerting, especially considering the little event I had a couple years back where a front brake line, stainless steel brake line, blew out on my other car at that point. So that was fun, and I don't want to experience that again, although nothing bad happened. It's still something in the back of my mind once in a while. So to mitigate that, I had been left foot braking, or I shouldn't say that, left foot pumping up the pedal a little bit, coming down the back straight, but that's kind of distracting. And I did find some stiffer springs from a different company. Might have been Alcon. I'll have to double check, but we'll get those installed and hopefully that'll take care of that problem. But for now, let's get this thing up in the air. Okay, now we got her up on jack stands, just high enough for pulling the wheels, doing inspections in and around the wheel wells, the brakes, suspension, coilovers, be able to dive underneath far enough to look at stuff and check bolt tightness, etc. Also makes it a little easier for any kind of underhood work. It's a little bit less bending over. But anyways, some more I'm going to be doing is just doing a general check over, looking for oil leaks in particular, since we installed the oil cooler and then drove 3 days on track with it. Should definitely give us an indication of any weeping. Clearly there was no massive leaks, or that would have happened at the track or even beforehand. At the track, I did notice that this it's like a ball bearing inside the fitting. You can see the little circle there. Was weeping some oil. That's the pivot joint location for this fitting here. And the oil seepage was coming from that. It was pretty obvious. I mean, not a lot, but it was obvious to me. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that at this point, because if I have to send that back as warranty, I'm going to have to redo some stuff here, and I don't know that I feel like dealing with that. I may come up with a different solution, since the line, now that it's in place, doesn't really need to pivot. And there's enough space to unthread it. It doesn't hit the engine to remove it. And you can see this little pipe fitting here. I did have the oil pressure sender located here in this adapter fitting that I put in, and that would have been ideal because it gets this thing away from the valve cover, and it's tight, but it fits fine for now or for this setup. But if I want to run the coil cover in the rain or heavy rain, then I would have to remove not remove the sender, but I'd have to unbolt the oil filter housing, push it out of the way in order to get that on, and then kind of just shove it back in there, and it would definitely be rubbing the coil cover on here. So I wanted to move it, but when I had it connected here, for some reason, the gauge or the sender was not reading oil pressure, which is odd. There should be pressure there. But when I move it back over to the oil filter housing where the idiot light sensor used to be, it works fine. So I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I may try swapping it back over one more time now that I've run the engine long enough that everything should be fully bled out, but that didn't seem to be the issue. I'm not really sure what the issue is, so if it doesn't work, then we'll leave it here, and I'll take that adapter out, and then actually this hose will have even more clearance to the engine, because it is this hose, I did make it long enough, it will bolt directly to that gold adapter fitting that's in the oil filter housing that is allowing me to run AN fittings. So anyways, I've already done a fair bit of checking on the lines and don't see anything alarming, or actually don't see anything at all, except it's going to be impossible or nearly impossible. You can see a little bit of a dark spot on the belly pan down there. There was some oil there, just a tiny bit. Yeah, it's pretty tough to get a good angle or get it to focus, but there's a little bit of oil down there, but it seems as though it's it's got dirt on it now, so I think it was just residual coming off of the engine mount bracket from where the oil lines go into the block. That was pretty messy doing that changeover, so I had to spray a lot of brake clean down there and rags and clean it up, and I think there was still just some residual. So it's always good to just do a general look over on the entire vehicle. And in this case, I'm also checking out my modifications here that I was talking about but did not video. I did build these fog light covers with some media behind it and cut down and built these screens here, and you can actually see there's a big dent in this one. So the screens and that idea certainly played out to hold true and keep big debris from entering in and impacting the air filter. So happy about that. See, we got some tire rubber marks, and then, as always, chunks of tire rubber off the track. Nice. Here's another one. I like to clean this stuff out as I see it, just as general maintenance, particularly in the wheel wells. It collects a lot. So once we get the wheels off, we'll definitely take a peek around and knock out any of the heavy, bigger pieces that I see. Before I take the wheels off though, this is good just automotive maintenance practice. Whenever you have a car in the air, that's my habit. I just always take both hands on these two sides here and give the wheel kind of a shake or a wiggle, and then I move my hands to the top and bottom and shake in that direction, or pull and push up and down, checking for wheel bearing play, tie rod ends, or other steering and suspension play that may have been introduced since the last time I checked. Whether it's a track car, street car, doesn't matter. That's just good practice to always check for that. And different suspension designs may give you more of a sign than others. You know, some designs you can wiggle the wheel all you want in a ball joint, or certain component may not show that it's has play because it's loaded when the suspension is unloaded. So some designs are like that. So just, precaution. It's not the only test you should do when checking, but it's a simple, easy one to do, and definitely works well on these, particularly for wheel bearings, and definitely for a track car. Wheel bearings take some big abuse, especially on a big heavy one like this. So I'm always checking those. And really same in the rear, actually in particular in the rear, since I had that bad experience when I first put the car together, that in the first 200 miles, I don't know if it was this one or the other wheel, already had play in it, and I didn't even have the car on the track yet. And the grease was all puked out, and then the other wheel, which other side was not loose, was already starting to show signs of that grease coming out of this heel. So I had to swap those out, and so far so good. Fingers crossed that this different brand, I don't recall offhand which ones I bought. They might be FAG, or if those were unavailable, it was probably whatever the next best thing. But FCP Euro for the win on that. These have lasted, I guess, long enough so far that if they do go out, I'll just do a warranty replacement on them. But we'll see. So let's get the wheels off and look inside. Okay, wheels are off, and now we're kind of trying to inspect things here. I already took a quick look around. Didn't really notice anything out of the ordinary. Little bits of tire rubber here and there. But otherwise everything so far seems tight and in order. No weird rub marks, no excessive or really any like shiny areas that would indicate either rubbing or something having come loose and moving around. You can see that little rub mark there. That's just from the back of this hose cover. It's actually like a heat shroud that I have on the stainless steel brake line, just to help with that rubbing problem, but also keep a little bit of extra heat away from the brake fluid. If it makes any difference, who knows, but it makes me feel good. Anyways, taking a look at the brakes here. The rotors are in fine shape as far as any kind of excessive cracking. I don't see any. I will be taking the brakes apart for deeper inspection, but like I mentioned, we're gonna take the calipers apart and put those different springs in, so I'll get an even better look, but nothing that's sticking out as out of the ordinary. Certainly going to measure them for thickness as well. I mean, they were new and only have a few weekends on them, but because I don't have any prior experience with these brakes, or even in particular with this brake pad compound, I just want to gather the data just so I know what to expect as time goes on. Speaking of brake pads, still got a decent amount in here. Certainly plenty enough that for $600 a set, you're not going to prematurely throw those away. But you can definitely bet on me having a new set with me starting at the next event next year. Hopefully Pit Race in 2025 will be my first event with GVC. Unconfirmed, but hopefully we'll be going back there next year. And fingers crossed that both the car is done and ready and I'm able to go. So you just never know. But brakes look good, and I'll be prepared at the track. I already have a spare set of front and rear rotors, or the rings, that I can change out, and will be start bringing to the track next year as well. And for sure, like I said, a new set of pads for the front and for the rear, just to have on hand. But I already took a peek at these, and spoiler alert, they're in good shape. Still a lot of meat on those, and it's pretty much what I would expect from the rears. A lot less temperature, a lot less abuse back here on the brakes. A little bit of surface rust from the car sitting outside for the past 3 weeks or so. But yeah, everything looks good back here so far. Certainly, in the wheel wells, the coilovers, the brakes, wheel studs. Actually, these studs I just replaced before the last event. I had 2 of them that were the threads were kind of butchered a little bit. And I just didn't want to. I had rammed some lug nuts on and off a few times, and knowing I had a 3-day weekend coming up, I didn't want to keep doing that and then risk stripping a lug, with the wheel on, or just kind of fatiguing and weakening the stud and risking any kind of breakage. I didn't take any chances. They're cheap enough, and I already had spare sets on hand, so I just quickly swapped them out. That's nice. These ones have the Allen key head or hole for a socket, and you can usually break them loose. Sometimes you got to put a little heat on it to break the Loctite, but then you get them out and clean out the threads and put the new ones in with some fresh red Loctite, and good to go on that part. So let's take maybe a quick peek underneath at the suspension and diff, and I'll have to peel the numbers off, and I know this is going to be hard for some to believe, but I might, before I put it away, actually wash this thing and get some of the carbon off the back. And if I'm real ambitious, I might just try to clean the paint one more time for the rest of the car's life. I never did that when I bought it, because the car's, it's dented, and she's got, some nice deep scratches that really aren't going to clean up, or at least not completely. And it's not meant to be a show car. Just look at that hood. It's beautiful. But I might clean it up and wax it once, just so that I'm kind of starting from point zero, and then let her get dirty and eat some track dust and rubber for the rest of its life. All right, now we're taking a peek underneath. I already took a peek. Don't see anything out of the ordinary. Not that I expected to, especially considering just about everything on here is new. New drive shaft and Guibo. All the exhaust still looks good. One thing I'm going to play with a little bit is try to figure out a better routing for the O2 sensor harness. I'm glad I wrapped the wiring with this high temp stuff, because it is touching the header here. It's just that the headers are very tight to the chassis. I probably did too good of a job getting everything cinched up on they're like a slip fit collectors to the primaries, and I got them real tight in there because I didn't want clearance issues. So they are very nice and tight here, but now it's causing the wiring to be kind of getting too close. So not really a big deal, but something I'll keep an eye on and may try to find a better solution in the future. But yeah, all is good here in the middle. In the back as well, everything is clean and dry on the new diff. All the suspension was tight. Diff mount bolts are still tight, and it's looking pretty good. Just got to check out the front suspension area and steering from underneath, I take the belly pan off and we'll take a peek. Alright, so now we are under the middle of the car, taking a peek here. I lowered the transmission skid plate just a little bit. Good news is it's dry, no leaks on the pan. However, there's a little bit of seepage here at the bottom of the trans. It doesn't come from off the sides, it's really just off the bottom, which tells me it's probably just that drain plug seeping a little bit. Fairly common issue with these transmissions. It's basically just a pipe plug. So usually I put some thread tape on there. So when I dump this oil and swap it out, which I'll probably do in the springtime, I'll make sure to put some tape on there, some Teflon tape, and that should solve that minor issue. But otherwise, everything looks pretty clean and dry and good to go here. All the exhaust looks nice and tight still. No leaks at the header pipes, at the primaries, that is. So everything looks nice there. Happy about that. I'm also in process of adding this AFR sensor and a gauge, which is not totally necessary, other than for tuning, dyno tuning the engine, to have this at minimum the pump, or the port for putting in a AFR sensor on the dyno, or maybe they can use my sensor and plug into it, but they want to be able to graph the AFRs on the dyno chart and program. Anyways, getting that wrapped up, and part of that is trying to figure out where I'm going to put this wiring in through the tunnel. And you can see here, this is an AC air conditioning condensation drain. There's one on each side. You can kind of see the other one. And yep, there it is. So I actually found where it goes in, and it's actually a pretty nice location because it comes into the cabin here and is a nice easy access point because there's no AC in this car anymore, so there's no reason for me to keep these drains going. So I'm just gonna cut the rubber here, get this grommet back in, because this is a really nice way to direct this wiring, which is this here, through the hole, and then I can put it up and direct it in to get it in the middle here. Probably gonna mount that gauge somewhere in this center section and remount this OBD2 port somewhere in the middle as well, which I had rewired previously just for convenience. Again, the gauge is really not necessary, but it'd be, I guess, kind of a fun thing to have, or really just a distraction on the track, but something I can take a peek at while wide open throttle on a straightaway, just to keep an eye on the AFRs. This is not a boosted engine, but it's also an expensive engine, so having some peace of mind that me revving this thing out to 7,000 or holding high RPMs into a braking zone, to feel confident that that's not going to be an issue. So I'm working on that. I did have a video clip of the front here with the front pan off, or skid plate, but that file got corrupted, so here we are. The skid plate's already back on, but I did do an inspection up here. Suspension's tight, steering's tight. That little bit of residual oil, I wiped that all down, so keep an eye on it. I don't think there's any leaks there, but like I said, it's all cleaned up now, and I will keep an eye on it. I think it was just left over from doing the oil cooler installation and when I had the oil filter housing out. So that's all cleaned up and buttoned up, all back together. Like I said, there were no issues there, nothing really to see. And that's about it. So the car's been looked over. Everything's looking in good shape. I have a list of things to do prior to next season. I'm going to hold off changing any fluids until springtime, so they're fresh in the spring. It's just, my decision on that. You can do really whatever you want. If you want to drain stuff post-season and have fresh fluids sitting in the off season so that the dirt's not in there, that's personal preference in my opinion. But as usual, your mileage may vary.